Hello, everyone. This is Colin Lange. I'm here out of New York City area. Welcome to this next session. We're about two-thirds of the way through the extraordinary webinar today. There's been tons of great content. I know our global CEO, Jane Garrity, jumped on very early my time to start us off over in Sydney, Australia this morning, and we've been moving hour by hour across the globe. Here we are in the New York City area, and we will finish up in San Francisco later this evening. So just prior to me, Alistair Lennox talked about a new era of commerce, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about corporate culture and transformation and what we can ultimately learn from remote working. So I'm the Executive Director of Culture and Engagement at Landor&FITCH. So that is a practice that we have here that connects brand and people to business strategy, ultimately helping to operationalize that inside of organizations. And as we all sit here in a virtual environment, it is almost obvious for me to say that we've been forced to really change the ways that we've been working across the board. And these new ways of working aren't things that are probably anything that we attempted to do prior, or maybe we did in fits and starts, but there's been a huge catalyst, and obviously that is the global pandemic. It sent business into a completely different environment, one in which we went from incredibly controlled systems, things where we had a great deal of certainty. We knew how to run our individual businesses very, very well, to fragmentation, to chaos, to loose decision-making, to flattening of corporate structures. All kinds of things have been happening in that period of having to adjust to new ways of working. But fundamentally, if we really think about it, we're all still having to achieve the same stuff. We just have to achieve the same stuff within ultimately new realities. So we're still looking to connect our people to purpose and drive forward with passion. We have to compete for talent, whether that's retaining the talent we have, or that's going out and finding new talent and acquiring them into our organization and inspiring them to do what we do. We have to protect our people in different ways from a health and a well-being standpoint, as well as all kinds of other sort of physical space considerations that we have in this new world. Our corporate cultures are being challenged, ones in which that we've had for a long time. And when I talk about culture throughout all of this, I'm talking really about corporate culture. I'm talking about how we get things done and how we work with each other. And so the ways we used to work in this new reality may or may not be the way that we need to work going forward. And it's that pressure on organizations that's causing yet another stress on top of trying to figure out how to work within these entirely new realities. So to put that into perspective or into some sort of framework that we can discuss, when we think about forced change, there's the spectrum of kind of forced change to adaptive advantage. And there are three areas of time that we're hearing a lot of organizations talk about. This first period that we're in, or depending on where you are in the world, depends on whether you're in it right now. We in the Americas are definitely in it. We're in a catalyst state, which is there's some forced change that's been pushed upon us, right? And this is all about forcing change of mindsets and behavior and actions and things we may or may not have done leading up to this point. There's an adaptation phase, which is potentially immediately following that. And then, of course, there's what lots of people are talking about right now is the new normal and trying to predict ultimately what that new normal is or could be for organizations and for businesses and for just people in general. You know, it's interesting because when I think about this spectrum, I think there's so much conversation right now about catalyst, and there's so much conversation about the new normal. There's much less about this middle stage of adaptation. And what's interesting as I look deeply into this and think about it is that the adaptation phase, the learning phase, how do we look at what is happening, what's been forced upon us, how we want to design that new normal for us coming out, whether it's our business or our clients' businesses or our partners' businesses, customers. It's this area of how we look at learning and iteration that we can take advantage and turn what might be seen as an initial limitation into a huge opportunity for us as organizations. Culture plays a tremendous role in that. Adaptation and learning is hugely important, but turning that learning into action is what ultimately will define success. And different organizational cultures have different abilities to do that inherently based on where they've come, how they've been treated, how they've been nurtured. And obviously, as we look forward to defining that new reality for ourselves, culture is going to be a huge component of how we look to move that forward and start to operationalize that. About a year ago, we did a study in EMEA, and we looked at organizations that we call unicorns. The unicorn is generally an organization that has rapidly found success and achieved a high level of valuation in a short period of time. We reached out in the study to a number of unicorns, and we talked to them about what about their organization, what about their business, what about their culture was particularly relevant. What's interesting about what we saw in that study and the results there, and what we're seeing now in the world around the forced change with the global pandemic, is that we can learn a lot from those unicorns. We can learn a lot from organizations that have a continual need to kind of reinvent themselves. So if we think of startups or we think of fast-growing organizations, they're often in a state of crisis, right? They're in a state in which they have some other factor coming into the environment, whether it's a new competitor, it's a new product, they brought a product out to the world and that product didn't land or wasn't as successful as they thought. So they're continually looking at that and adapting to those processes. They're in that learning phase a lot, that iteration phase a lot. And when they're successful, when they truly become a unicorn, it's that learning, it's that middle phase that allows them to continually define what that new reality is. So the opportunity for all of us is to look back at that, look at what's happening to us, where we are, and say, those are the successes we have to define now. We have to prioritize them up. We have to shed what isn't working, and we have to adopt ultimately what is working so we can move forward rapidly. I think it's really good in these types of situations to think about some people in the world who have done it well, or at least done it. And so the first example I want to chat about a little bit is Zoom. And, I think we're all very familiar with Zoom. Obviously, the video sharing organization or product that came on the scene relatively, the last handful of weeks and months, and gave their product away to everybody, allowing them to connect in a virtual world in new ways that they, recognizing the need to be able to connect people all over the world. What's really interesting, though, is that that's the headline news, and that's a great piece of headline news. It's a great thing that they did. But when you start to pull back the curtain and really understand where Zoom came from, who they are, what they're built on, how brand leads their culture, and they're really very much a purpose-driven organization. Their CEO built the organization because he felt that all video sharing was really arduous and difficult, and it didn't have to be. That for people to communicate through technology should be easy, and it should be simple, and it should be ultimately a happy experience. So he built a product that was based around the purpose of delivering happiness, a company that in turn was built around delivering an experience of happiness. And ultimately that built a culture of happiness, built a culture of caring, one in which then when something like the global pandemic hit, it was a very natural switch for them to say, yes, this is what we need to do. We need to make our product ubiquitous for everybody in a way that allows them to then enjoy the connectivity, the caring, and the happiness in which the culture is built on. So brand and culture become a rubric. They become a decision-making filter for us not only to define what we need to do today based on forced change or anything else that's happening in our industry or business, but ultimately help us to design what that new normal is for us. So there was an earlier question that was brought up in one of the sessions about whether or not Zoom might have some brand carryover or some challenges coming out of the global pandemic because of the decisions they've made. And I think you can probably debate that one way or another, but fundamentally they're going to have an opportunity that people will remember them as the organization that is based on a certain set of values, a certain set of characteristics, and took a certain action in this environment. We're all going to be judged by how we lead through crisis. We always are, as brands, as companies, as employees, as leaders. Those are all things that stay with us. And the decisions we make now and how we ultimately design that new reality and how we engage are really important. The other example, originally when I started to think about this, I thought about it as a particular company example. And then it actually started to balloon up to be a category example. And so when I was thinking about financial services in particular, it is an area of the world that is clearly essential, right? Moving the world's money around, creating value, allowing us to exchange currency, incredibly important. Many of these organizations are built in a world of physicality. a world in which you have to put people on a trading floor in order to use the technologies that you've built over the years to make sure that the trades can go through, the security can be there. There's a certain level of obviously regulation, but also need for interaction, or at least that's what it was thought. In a forced change like we're in now, all bets are off, and a lot of those organizations have had to very, very rapidly adapt to what it means to be remote. And can they be remote? And it's really interesting as we look across Landor&FITCH clients, and I look across other organizations I've had the opportunity to talk to in the last couple of months in this particular sector, and they're all dealing with it in different ways. But what is fundamentally interesting about everyone I've been able to speak to is that middle piece of learning is really, really relevant and salient within each one of their individual businesses, ranging from financial institutions that are looking at rewriting their entire culture and values so that they can adjust to an operating system that is less maybe hierarchical, less about sort of the old ways of working, and more about focusing on the new adaptation and giving employees the ability to have much more autonomous decision making, to organizations that have looked across just very functional attributes of their organization, such as a trading floor, where the previous ideas were around, we've got to put everybody together in the same space, and we have to line up long desks of traders, and with the buy side and the sell side and the marketing side all have to be together because there's going to be some magic sauce that happens. And what they're looking back based on this forced change, and they're saying, maybe that isn't true anymore. Maybe we don't have to have everybody in the same space. Maybe we can designate certain employees, quote, critical in-space employees, and others can perform their job remotely. And we can embrace technology and accelerate digital transformation in a way that we haven't had to in the past. So again, redefining their new realities through the learnings and the adaptations that they have in the moment and over the times that they're adjusting to the forced change. And of course, Twitter. A great headline that we had, I don't know, probably about a week ago, where they came out and they said to the world, you know what, we've started to really think about everything that's going on. And for us, we're not going to make an employee go back to an office if they don't feel comfortable, ever. A huge statement. But it says a lot about Twitter's culture. It says a lot about what they value. It says a lot about how they can empathize not only for the now, but they can start to really look forward and articulate what they're seeing as their new normal. I think one of the challenges that I hear a lot is that there's an ambiguity about what new normal is, whether we should even be calling it a new normal, or is it just going to be normal? And I think the fundamental thing is that whatever it is, it has to be through the lens of your brand and the lens of your individual organization, and you needed to take the opportunity to design what that is for you, take that now, figure out what's really good, and make sure that what you're heading toward isn't just what you were. Because if we lose the opportunity of being able to learn and put that learning to action, then that's where failure will happen. If we ultimately learn and take action, only good things and only acceleration will happen on the flip side of all of this. So just as a quick recap, so if you walk away with nothing except these 5, that would be great. But fundamentally, tremendous pressure on corporate cultures, great deal of testing that's happening. And we're starting to see resilience. We're starting to see organizations that are really succeeding, as I've cited a handful. Brand and how we respond will be how we are measured going forward. Is this an organization that I want to work for? Is this an organization that I want to buy from? Is this an organization that is going to be able to really adjust and deliver on my needs, whether it's internal or external? And we have an opportunity now to really flip that script, right? Look at those opportunities and not just lament the fact that we aren't in the space that we used to be and we're delivering in the way that we used to deliver, but rather what is that new thing that we can create and how do we design that? And I use design in the broadest sense of the word because this is an opportunity to think about organizations in the broadest sense of how we can think about them, how we behave, how we interact, the products we deliver, the styles, the touch points, all of those things are ultimately on the table because we're all trying to figure out what it's like to be inside of this new reality and define inside of this new normal. But I really appreciate all the time that you've spent with me today, and I hope that this has been informative and thoughtful. Coming up next, we have after me at the top of the hour, so 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Gabe Miller, and he's going to be talking about Pop Goes Your Brand. So I hope you stay on and hope you will not only see his session, but the rest of the sessions that we have. And we will be distributing all of these sessions recorded at some point after this. Thanks so much. Stay well.